Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. My name is Dr. Kameelah Mu'Min Oseguera, and I am the founder and president of Muslim Wellness Foundation and the founder of the Black Muslim Psychology Conference. And just want to welcome you to this Black Muslim Psychology Conference 2025 info session. We've put out a call for proposals, and we want you to join us in Chicago in July. And so joining me today is my dear friend, Dr. Donna Auston, who has, she's an OG BMPC planning member, right? We've been organizing.
I like the OG. I like the OG
Yes.
designation.
We've been planning this space since early 2015. And we are both thrilled that one, it has been continued to be, alhamdulillah, a space where people can think deeply and connect with other people about the Black Muslim experience related to health and healing, but as we'll explain over the course of this webinar, certainly encompasses more than just a focus on mental health and mental illness, right? This is a space that we have been, very committed to ensuring that is generative, that we are both answering questions and asking some really hard questions about who we are and what we imagine for our futures. And we always want to invite additional voices into that conversation. So yes, it has included mental health experts, and it has always included activists and artists, and educators and lawyers and anthropologists, community members. So this is an intentional space designed for us to harness the power of all of our sources of knowledge to apply to not only what is happening, what are the challenges that we're facing, right, as a community, but also what are we doing well? How have we responded to the challenges? How have we been sort of brilliant innovators in considering what we need for ourselves to connect, to deepen our relationship to the creator, to the earth, right, to the community. And so we wanted to, at this time, with our 10th anniversary coming up, provide a broader invitation for voices to join us in that ongoing conversation. And our theme this year is SelebeYoon. It means in Wolof, the crossroads, right? And it's a spiritual, intellectual, emotional, psychological, like physical crossroads at this time in 2025, given what we're facing in the world, both here and abroad. We need to re-examine, right? We need to sort of do some reflection on the past, have an accurate assessment of where we currently are, and also imagine more for ourselves in the future, for ourselves and for, right, inshallah, our descendants, what it will mean in this moment for us to take a look at this crossroads and develop not only good dialogue, but good relationships, good planning, good strategy, right? For how we meet this moment. So I'm going to pause there. Donna, I want you to, before we sort of get into the details of the proposal guide and all of that, just your reflection on what it means for us to be at this 10th year anniversary of the Black Muslim Psychology Conference.
I think, well, first of all, like, where has the 10 years gone? It's I think it's probably one thing that stands out to me. I mean, it just seems like just yesterday that we were coming together at the University of Pennsylvania, which is where the inaugural gathering was. Um, it was an intimate gathering, so it wasn't, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. But it was a good solid core. We got a good group of folks from, as far away as California, but a lot of our participants were folks from Philly and Jersey and New York and Baltimore and sort of around a cluster of the Eastern Seaboard, where there's just a dot, sort of a dotted landscape of Black Muslim communities along that corridor. Um, we got together And some, we had a plan for the meeting, but there was also sort of things happening that we did not anticipate. We were, I don't know, a week or less or something like that. After the Charleston shooting
Yes.
in the church, which obviously we didn't see coming. Um, and it was, sort of really, I think, in a lot of ways, divine providence that we were already planning to be together because we needed that space to sort of sort through all of the things that we were feeling. There's other stuff happening, um, Islamophobic attacks on Black Muslim communities in New York, upstate, the Baltimore uprising.
Oh,
Um, all of this stuff was happening. And, I think the foresight in sort of arranging a gathering is foresight, but it was also sort of you just tapping into what was already leading us to these particular breaches or spectacular events, right? Understanding that just the environment is hostile for us, for our communities, that we need spaces where we can kind of come together um, and strategize about our lives, um, to, to laugh together, to break bread together, to dream together. And that part is particularly important, I think, for me in terms of thinking about what this space is really good for is providing the opportunity to dream together in addition to all of those other things, right? Because dreaming is how we imagine something other than what we currently have. Um, and it's an essential, as far as I'm concerned, is an essential part of any practice of liberation. And so, so yeah, so and then, it grew. The next year it was a bigger group of folks. The next year we outgrew the space that we were in. Yeah, I mean, so it has taken off in a way that I think has really been an amazing blessing, and an incredible testament to the core of people who have worked on this project over the years. So all of the community members, whether they've been with us for 1 year or 10 years or 7 or 5 or whatever, um, that's really what has made the space blossom is people coming in. I've learned so much from different people, from the work that different folks are doing, from the questions that they're thinking about, to the strategies that they're devising to sort of meet the challenges and rise above them. Um, I've been inspired um, by the creativity, by the beauty. Um, I've been frustrated,
tell us about the
because
frustration.
that's a part of being in community,
Yeah.
right? I've been frustrated by a lot of things, by, I mean, external circumstances, but also sort of internal knots that we're still trying to work out amongst ourselves. But this is why we need to be together. This is why we need to do this, is because we still have work to do. Um, so it's just been a range of um experiences around this gathering. I think it's something really unique. I think it's something really special. And I think that what makes it what it is the community, the broader community. Um, Everybody who says, "Oh, like I'm not qualified to get up and teach people anything." Meanwhile, you've been taking care of the community's children for the last 30 years, right? You know, oh, I'm not, I'm just not, I'm just whatever. And it's like, no, but you're actually keeping us alive.
Oh, oh,
Um,
yes.
in so many ways, right? You're actually inspiring us. You're actually motivating us. You are making space for us to be and breathe. And so, like, we want all of those people, in whatever sphere that you happen to toil in, right, to be able to come and join us and share your wisdom with us and teach us and inspire us and lead us forward.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I just want to underline for those who, I think we hear it every year,
Yeah.
say, and when we send out invitations for people to present, their response is usually me. Like, what do I have, to offer? And so part of what we have appreciated about this space is that it allows us to recognize and appreciate our own wisdom, right? And so, yes, it's a conference, but it's something that is all at once, sort of a retreat, a family reunion, right? It is a challenging space where we ask really hard questions and we have a lot of fun doing it. Um, and part of the the way that we have been able to cultivate a space that provides so much nourishment is because we have this very wide range of expertise, right? And so we have called community members who feel like, well, I don't have a formal degree, I don't have letters after my name. You're a community scholar. You have acquired expertise and wisdom over the course of your service, right, to your community that is invaluable, right? And so it becomes a meeting place for those who otherwise might be working in really siloed, right, ways.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there were educators doing this innovative work. I didn't know that there were artists who were also, you know, developing frameworks of liberation around storytelling. And so this opportunity, and the reason that we are so like committed to bringing in different voices is that we need that cross fertilization. We need people who are approaching some of the long-standing, right, sort of dilemmas in our communities, but in innovative ways. And we've seen as a result partnerships, right, continued conversations of people who, are introduced to each other's work, right, and commitment, and are able to, elaborate on that in really ways that we couldn't imagine. So that's, for us, part of what makes this space unique, right? It is that it is bringing together such an amazing cross section of folks, including, right, as I've mentioned, we've always, from the very first year in 2015, had artist facilitators, right? Who is giving sort of creative expression to the circumstances that we find ourselves in, right? And that contribution is as valuable as someone, right, who's exploring it from a research or academic, right, perspective. Um, so I want to actually pull up the proposal guide. I dropped the link in the chat for everyone to be able to see it, right? I'm going to share it on my screen. And I want to first say this document includes so much background and context about the why, right, of BMPC. Why is it important? How did this language around Black Muslim psychology develop? What is Black Muslim appreciative inquiry? Right? What are we looking for in terms of, potential proposals? So don't get intimidated by the page limit, right? Or the number of pages. This is a 45-page document. And what is also included here are some really beautiful photos of who we are, right? That is always, again, kind of a core of what we do at BMPC, even in highlighting, right, every speaker, right? And our approach here is that, yes, we have keynotes, we have invited speakers, but everyone who attends is important. Everyone who attends has something valuable to contribute. And so we want to highlight that expertise. And I'll say really quickly that, as sometimes time consuming as it might be for us in the lead up to our conference to put a spotlight on every speaker who is being featured, the goal of that is that when people begin to Google Black Muslims, very often BMPC are the images that kind of rise to the top of that search inquiry, right? So again, we want to highlight for ourselves where the expertise, where the brilliance, where the wisdom, where the knowledge is, and then be able to share that with the world. And so if you Google Black Muslim Psychology Conference, Black Muslim Psychology, Black Muslims, very often it is those images of who we are that start to rise, right, to the top of that list. So everything, that we try to do here is very intentional. It's about lifting up who we are, our own capabilities, our own creativity, ingenuity, and first being able to convince ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because we're offering many counter narratives to what people typically think about who we are, and we internalize that, right? And so the showing and the telling is first for our benefit, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so much of everything. And we have to remind ourselves that we are not sort of bereft. We are not sort of just kind of floating around in the wilderness with no skills, no strategy, no information. And so in our curation of speakers, of presenters, of attendees, it is just as a beautiful reminder, right? We have everything we need, right? It is now up to us to be able to apply what we already have to the circumstances that we're facing. So let's take a look. And as I've said, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A. We're going to open up and bring people in to the webinar. We just want to make sure that we are covering this information as concisely and comprehensively as possible. So we're going to go through the overview, submission guide, and Donna, feel free. I mean, part of what you do, right, in your work is evaluation of proposals, right? And so you've seen the good, bad, and the ugly. And so we want to give the folks who are joining us some insider tips, right? We can provide this information, and we also want to hear from you about what you would like to contribute. So just, I want to say, beginning with the first page, this is why us being able to see ourselves is so important, right? These beautiful women, Fanta Doumbia on the right, and her sister Asita is, Fanta is a board member of Muslim Wellness Foundation. She's been involved in the planning of BMPC for a few years. And this was taken last year, this photo. And so again, how do we see ourselves, right? And our knowledge and the beauty that we possess that we must share with one another, right? And with the wider audience of folks. So go down. This is all that's included in this proposal guide. So it gives you an introduction of the theme for this year, which is the Crossroads of Healing, the conference overview, and then what is Black Muslim psychology. So I'm going to briefly go through that section. And then, Donna, I want to turn it over to you to share a little bit more about the CFP overview.
Okay.
So here again, Ustad Tabari Zahir is a member of the BMPC Planning Committee. He is the founder of Lamps of Light Project in California. He is currently working on raising funds for the first Muslim recovery center in Southern California. So we are, again, inviting people into the conversation who not only recognize where our challenges are, but they are coming with some really brilliant strategy, right, for how we move through the circumstances that we face that can be really overwhelming. So we've been doing this for a decade. And alhamdulillah, what I can say again is that BMPC has been a space of generativity, of creativity, of thinking through. We can't come with the sort of the same old strategy to age-old problems. We need to think outside the box, and we need as many people involved in that conversation as possible. So amplifying voices of Black Muslim scholars, building intergenerational connections. We have been intentional about inviting in young people, right? What do they think? This is the world that they will likely live in when we are no longer here. So we want to know, right, what is on their mind? What do they want to prioritize? Last year, our theme was longing for home, a place where a soul can rest. And our keynote speakers were Warsan Shiri, who is a British Somali poet, and Hussein Abdullah. And for this year, we want to continue, right, some of that conversation around belonging and home and place, and ask the questions you can see here, right? What lessons from the past do we want to bring forward? What new directions, right? How do we navigate in the midst of violence and repression and genocide, of ongoing sort of violent attacks against who we are? What do we still aspire to, right, in this world? And how do we strengthen, right? How do we fortify ourselves for that battle ahead? So here you can see this proposal guide also includes a timeline of the themes that we have focused on beginning in 2015 with just simply faith, identity, and well-being, right? The psychology of Black Muslims. We moved into understanding activism, resilience, and healing, leading with compassion, liberation and love, miseducation of the Black Muslim. And on the Black Muslim Psychology website, you'll be able to kind of scroll through, not the entire conference, but some of the highlights from those years. For this year, again, here's an image taken from the 2024 conference. This is how we are, right? We are armed with the faith that we're rooted in, our spiritual grounding, right? And a very strong commitment to bringing all of who we are into the conversation. So for 2025, we're thinking about these crossroads, right? What it means for us to think about time in this way, right? Time, you know, we always have two anchors for our conference theme. One is, you know, scriptural, is Quranic, and pulling often from the wisdom of Black scholars to help frame these conversations. So we want to think about the crossroads of time, right, of faith, of truth, right, and of collective resilience and healing. Let's see here. Oops, it's not allowing me to go. Okay. This is a continuation of our timeline, some of the changes that we've made over that time. And again, always bringing in creativity. So Marion Poppins is a Black Muslim graphic designer who created, right, what we call our BMPC mascots, Nairobi and Bilal. And this was our way of saying we also must center children and youth, right, and how they think about themselves. So this is just, again, some visual images of how we want to invite into generational perspectives. Okay. So here I'm going to cover really quickly, what is Black Muslim psychology? Because this is often the place where either folks feel like, well, I'm not a mental health expert. Maybe my expertise is you know, in engineering, maybe it's in anthropology, it's in education. So what might I add to a Black Muslim psychology conference? And it is a lot. This image was actually taken in 2014 at the first Muslim-led Black Lives Matter rally in the United States. And it was organized by myself, Donna, and a few other Black Muslims to respond to the murder of a young man named Brandon Brown. And this rally took place in Philadelphia, downtown. And it's sort of the catalyst for us beginning to think about, what does it mean for us to understand ourselves, right, spiritually, mentally, psychologically, and what we need. And so Black Muslim psychology is one, thinking through this unique intersection, right, of race, religion, of history, of identity, and understanding that we have very particular vulnerabilities, right? And it is inclusive of those, if you see the note here, Black Muslim as not being limited to African American Muslims, but those who join, right, this set of circumstances, this context, and identify as Black African, East African, West African, descendants of enslaved people, or free, right? We're thinking about the Afro-Arab community, Afro-Latinx, Afro-Caribbean, right? And so in this way, the United States becomes a crossroads for all of these different aspects, right? In terms of ethnicity, language, experience, history. And we want to pay attention to that, right? It is how we develop the framework for our conversation that invites in, again, other perspectives that may be rooted outside of the United States as well, right?
And if I can just say something, just to add to that here, I think it's also important to note that that has always been the case for Black Islam in America, right? So many of the pivotal figures in our community's history have had transnational, right, connections, whether that's by birth or by association. Malcolm X's mother was from Grenada.
Yes,
Farrakhan's, has Caribbean roots in St. Kitts, right? But also many of the early Muslim movements were sort of nurtured in Marcus Garvey's movement. So Sudanese Muslims, there was a Sudanese teacher who who was one of Marcus Garvey's mentors. Many of those figures either passed through the Garvey movement themselves or their parents, like Malcolm X, passed through the Garvey, were sort of like staples in the Garvey movement, right? So our perspective on liberation, Islam, spirituality, freedom, um, in this country has always been expansive in terms
right.
of its conception of Blackness, right? So we feel like we're stepping into that,
Yes,
and sort of taking it wherever we can take it, right? But this is who we've always been, right? We've always been a global people.
that's right. That's right. And I think that's important for us to recognize that we, in many ways, we're expanding on the foundation that has already been laid, right? When we think about figures like Dr. Naeem Akbar, right, talking about sort of the consciousness of African people,
Right.
this is, for us, kind of a curation of all of the different streams of knowledge, right, and of theorizing, of practice around race, religion, right, liberation, and our contribution to the expansion, right, of that field of study. Um, so here are some of the other sort of theories that have been incorporated into this understanding is thinking about Black identity development, right? Healing-centered engagement, even Muslim womanist philosophy from Dr. Deborah Majid, may Allah be pleased with her, the work that I've done on identity and well-being of Black Muslim emerging adults, and then broadly psychological well-being, right? So our approach has been interdisciplinary. It's drawing from the groundwork that has been laid. What many people are often surprised to find out is that Malcolm X, I believe in 62, was invited by a group of social workers in Harlem to explain the nation's, treatment approach.
Right.
So this is, maybe I'll send it out and provide the link. But this was reported in the New York Times, right? That
Yes.
the social workers were saying, you all are doing something around addiction, and we want to be as informed as possible because it seems like what you're doing is effective, right?
Working.
As a treatment modality, right? So when we're talking about Black Muslim psychology, for us in 2014 and 2015, it is a continuation, right, of a conversation that began many, many decades ago, and has always been present. So this call for proposals, again, all of this is in the proposal guide. And so for this year, 10th anniversary, the Crossroads of Healing is our theme. And Nana, can you say a little bit more about sort of how we understand psychology? Because I think this is where we often find people are reluctant to kind of step forward as presenters. Um, but the invitation is there for those who even fall outside of, the psychological mental health expertise.
Right. So I'm not a psychologist, and I do not play one on TV either. So I'm an anthropologist by training, though, perhaps you could make an argument that I certainly am, have a key preoccupation with human behavior. But it's not, um, like I don't have clinical credentials. Right? I don't do that type of work per se. Um, but psychology, it's actually in some ways something that I think about in the work that I do, like my research on Black Muslim activism, both like sort of thinking about it as how there's sort of a tradition of it that has coalesced over the decades, right? But then also like how folks have stepped into that, particularly in the context of the immediate post-Ferguson years is sort of my main body of research here. Um, but psychology in those contexts for early Muslim communities in the US, they may or may not have used the word psychology at all, but there was an understanding that, making sure that our people had something that they called knowledge of self,
That's
right?
right.
Or, other types of terms, or Malcolm X's famous speech, where he sort of asks, who taught you to hate yourself and your hair and your skin, right? Developed a set of practices for their communities that sort of encourage people to take seriously the beauty with which we were created, to move away from skin bleach cream, or to assess within an addiction context, sort of
Mhm.
why are you compelled, sort of understanding that people needed treatment for addiction, right? But also sort of understanding that some of the underlying factors that drive people to this in the first place have to do with the conditions, the structural conditions in which they live, has to do with the fact that we've been sort of so inundated with negative um, conceptions of ourself that we turn to self-destructive behaviors, right? And as a way of sort of, confronting that thing that we've learned to detest so much, which is ourselves. They, talked about and sort of developed programming and interventions around sort of um, intercommunity violence, right? And sort of understanding that some of the roots of that, right? Yes, there's the structural conditions, which they've never let off the hook, right? That sort of create an environment in which this is possible, but also in ways that make this desirable, right? Because we've learned how to internalize something about ourselves that renders our lives cheap, even amongst ourselves, right? So there's so many ways that this shows up, right, in our communities historically. And so psychology is, sort of is a holistic term that sort of covers a lot of things about just how we understand ourselves and the world that we live in and our place in it, what we ought to be doing about it, that sort of thing, right? So psychology is not about clinical settings, right? But psychology is about how we understand and imagine ourselves in the world. And
Absolutely.
so, like, that means that if you are an anthropologist like me, you have a place here. If you're an artist, you have a place here. If you're a scientist, um, and say you're interested in thinking about how do we bring our people into the field, right? How do we create pathways for Black Muslim researchers, or young people who might be interested in this path, for example, to, to sort of see themselves and place themselves in the field. How have Black Muslim scientists, the research that they do intervened on problems that, that actually impact our communities? So I don't know, you work in pharmaceutical research, maybe you've had an opportunity to generate some insights about creating, medicines that don't have pork ingredients, or are accessible to people on limited incomes, or like literally like whatever, right? Um, if you are if you are a an educator, like how have you been sort of sharing what you know with people in your community, whether they're Muslim or not, right? Whatever, like, innovative childcare paradigms, or um or community education projects that sort of bring essential knowledge to people that they might not otherwise get, if they're not in a specific institutional setting. So maybe you have a community political reading group, right? Or like, and that you've been running for a few years, or a book club, or I mean, like, if you're a nutritionist, right? And you're just like, okay, how do we sort of navigate a landscape of food apartheid and deprivation in order to make sure that our people are healthy and thriving, in terms of their nourishment, or that they can afford groceries or whatever, right? Um, there's so many people, and I know so many people who are just doing stuff, and they, to be honest with you, sometimes they're not even doing this. They might be Muslim people, but they may not even be sort of targeting Muslims with their work. um they might not, if you don't really know them like that, you might not even know that they're Muslim, because it's not necessarily a part of their label. um but they're out here creating community libraries and artistic opportunities, and feeding people, um providing interventions for overdose and accessibility to life-saving techniques and medications that help save people who might be, facing that particular type of precarity. Um, you have folks, and some of these are, I mean, I'm sort of generalizing some of these examples, but as I'm talking about this, a lot of these examples are actually real people that I know, and some of them I've come to know through the BMPC space. So like, it's there's the possibilities are really endless. And we encourage people to really think creatively about where they might fit in, um, or where they might intervene and contribute, and where they might teach us all something about how it is to be in the world, and to sort of, make wellness, um, healthy self conceptions, um, nurturing communities, caregiving, caretaking, all of these things, how you might implement these in ways that, that actually advance all of the principles that we live by as Black Muslim people interested both in sort of Islamic understandings of preserving life, um, and caring for other humans, and establishing justice, and doing all of these other things that the Quran and the Sirah and the Hadith literature encourage us to do, but also sort of understanding that we have a very rich tradition of Black liberation. Um, Many of those thinkers were also Muslim, by the way, right? Of course, right? So, but like, but understanding, like, what does it mean to be a people who are connected through diaspora, and so are, sort of imagine ourselves as a community, but what also might it mean to actually return to some principles, displaced in the colonial order of the last 100+ years, that have prioritized violence and extraction and domination, right, into another type of way of being in the world that actually prioritizes care and justice, um, and actually making sure that people are okay, and that the earth is okay, and that, like, whatever.
Yes.
So like, um and that we can all live and thrive, but not at the expense of each other, right? And so, and that's a type of what of wellness, right? That is a type of balance that we are sort of understanding as the goal. When we talk about psychology, we're talking about establishing adil, or balance and justice, right, in the world, in all of the domains that we work in, right? So come to, and if you have questions, I know there are a couple in chat, which I guess we'll get to at some point, inshallah. We'll try to get to specific questions about, hey, with this type of proposal work. We're happy to answer those types of questions here or elsewhere. So like if you're on the call and don't get a chance to answer your question, or if you're listening to the recording later, or something comes up later that you didn't think of while we were in conversation here directly, like reach out, say, hey, and we're also too, I think we've been willing and have worked with people who maybe submitted a proposal that maybe didn't quite hit the mark initially, right?
Yeah,
But we see that, there's something here. There's absolutely something here that we can work with and we want to work with, and that would really enrich the proceedings. We're happy to, if we can, to try and say, hey, maybe an adjustment here, maybe a little bit of tinkering here, maybe some additional questions that you might want to consider here, right? Whatever, to sort of help people to sort of fine tune what they've come up with,
absolutely.
in a way that actually would make it stronger, um, and more impactful, and productive and generative for everybody. So, so it's certainly, I think, a leap for people if you don't do this type of thing um, in your daily life. Um, it's, especially, I think, sometimes harder because you just do the work and you're not thinking about it for any type of purposes of documenting it for people, but just because it needs to get done. Um,
So
Sometimes putting that into words, or putting that, or selling it, right? Is because on some level you're selling it, right? You're pitching it as a viable sort of, okay, is this a conversation that we could have in this space in this way? Um, it's sometimes just going into salesperson mode is a little, is a little tricky. And even like even if you do this, like, I mean, I'm an academic, right? Whatever. Like sometimes it's just like, okay, let me try to like sell this to a grant maker or whoever I need to sell this to. There's the voices in the head, right? It's something that I'm interested in, and I just think it's important because I'm interested in it. But maybe I'm shortchanging myself
that's right. And
when
that's,
yeah,
I mean,
when I'm like, oh no, nobody's gonna care about this, right? Um,
and so that's why part of the in this proposal guide, and again, I'm encouraging folks to kind of read through it, right, carefully, because what we're also saying is that we're using terminology that you may not apply to your own work, but it absolutely fits. And so the four categories that and the four categories is like how we organize, right? The ways that we want to share this information. So the first is under health and healing, religious leadership, youth and emerging adulthood, and art, culture, and activism. Now, within those four categories, everybody can come to the party, right? And so what we're saying is going through this guide will help you understand how your work fits in this broader conversation on wellness and justice and liberation. So I want to pose a couple questions that are in the Q&A just so folks can get some sort of immediate feedback. But I also want to go here to, we have the categories, right? Health and healing, religious leadership, youth and emerging adulthood, and art, culture, and activism. Those are the categories, but the way in which we want folks to sort of think about how to present this information or the wisdom that you've gathered over time is through what we've called Black Muslim appreciative inquiry, right? Essentially, what it means is this is a strength-based, right, positive approach to problem solving, right? We are not looking for deficit, pathologizing sort of language about our communities. Essentially, what Black Muslim appreciative inquiry draws from is this strength-based approach that says, what are we doing well, right? We have, over the years, developed many, many lists of the problems that we're confronted by. That is true, right? This is not ignoring the reality. This is saying, in the midst of that, we are doing something well. What is that? And how do we do more of it, right? So this appreciative inquiry process says, what is life-giving, right? What has sustained us? What might happen if we maximized our ability to do more of that thing that is working for us, right? How do we create strategies that can advance that vision? And then how do we sustain it? Okay. So it looks like, I want to just scroll here for a second. It looks like us asking, right, what gives life? Okay. And then we're also considering, how do we, at this crossroad of time, 2025, right? How do we imagine more for ourselves? What are we dreaming about, right? How do we take that dream and design strategies, approaches, interventions, conversations that allow us to flourish, right? And then in that future that we imagine for ourselves, and we're designing strategies for us to be able to get there, what then does it mean for us to build structures that can be sustained over time? Okay, so say you are doing an intervention or conversations around children and identity, and it says, well, what are we already doing well in community when it comes to our young people, right? How are we saying, you know what, let's challenge ourselves and push this a little bit more, right? So that we can deepen the work. And then how do we sustain it, right? So I want to, there's a question first, the first question in the chat from Sophia Cheatham, who was with us for BMPC 2021, Assalamu alaikum, Sophia, and is an artist. And she says, I co-lead an art making professional development fellowship that has uplifted primarily non-Black artists by circumstance, but I'm interested in sharing the opportunity and trying to recruit more Black artists, right, DMV or Mid-Atlantic based. Would this be an appropriate space to submit a proposal to talk about this work? So Donna, how would you respond to that, sort of given our appreciative inquiry and our focus on bringing in, right, an interdisciplinary voices to the conversation?
Okay, so yes, so sound like I'm Sophia. So in general, I just want to, just before I get into the specific question, I want to just say that, like, all of what Dr. Cam said, I think in some ways I might summarize that as just saying, like, because I want to emphasize that we don't, you said this, but I want to emphasize it. We do not recommend skating over the difficulties. That's one of the best things about the BMP space, is that there are honest conversations happening here. But I think, for me, I think one of the things that might summarize an appreciative inquiry approach, I'll say it, the full name, instead of, so people don't think I'm talking about AI, it's artificial intelligence, is that I think the challenges, the difficulties, the limitations are not, there may be a starting point, but not an ending point.
Right.
Right. In other words, you want to go, okay, yes, we have these challenges and here's how we're meeting them. Right. As opposed to, everything is terrible and it's never going to get better. Right. So it's really just a shift in. So we want honesty, right? We want clarity about what our challenges are, but we don't want to be limited and constrained fully by them. So, but to get to Sophia's specific question, yes. I think how I might think about this, or one way to think about it, and piggybacking on what I just said, right, is to say, okay, well, up until now, it's been challenging for whatever reasons, right, to sort of service Black artists through this opportunity, for whatever reasons, right? And maybe you could tell us what those are. in the presentation or whatever. But then saying, hey, here's what it would look like if we were able to sort of bring more Black artists into this program. Here's what the possibilities could be. Here's what the benefits would be. Maybe you have, or maybe you don't, and maybe part of this is what you do in the workshop, right? Maybe in conversation with your audience, there are ways to sort of, you know, hey, some suggestions about how to proceed forward so that you're actually able to recruit more Black artists, like whatever, right? Maybe some solutions will come from that conversation, or some potential solutions will come from that conversation. So in other words, the fact that up until now you haven't been able to, that's a challenge, right? But that's not the ending point of the conversation, right? The ending point of the conversation is, okay, how do we push past what has already been and actually sort of increase and bring more Black folks into this type of space, because it will benefit us through by X, Y, and Z, right? So I think framing it potentially like that is one possible way to think about how to make it most useful for the audience at BMPC.
So we also have included here, and this again is in the proposal guide, that as we look at these four broad categories of health, leadership, youth, and art and activism, that specifically through the lens of Black Muslim appreciative inquiry, here just, you don't have to limit, right, your proposal to these questions, but we want to provide like just some food for thought, right?
Yeah.
So how are we navigating, thinking about sort of what are we doing well, right? That first aspect of appreciative inquiry. How are we doing this well, right? What are the practices that sustain us at this intersection, right? How do we understand the realities that have emerged and also the lessons that we've learned, right? If we're thinking about sort of envisioning the future, what if you could design, right, Black Muslim communities that is thriving? What would be the core components of that community that would allow people to flourish in the midst of these circumstances, right? So we're not saying you have to be actually practicing or have research, right? What if you have ideas that you want to collaborate with other people, right? I want to think about what it means for us to build intentional communities that can protect us and nourish us in this time, right? I have some thoughts about that, and I want to share and get feedback from other people. I think this aspect of not just us acknowledging what we're doing well and dreaming, but strategizing. I think this is, where some of our best intentions fail, is we don't have a plan, right? And so this asks us to say, what are the models that we might use? How do we design institutions? How do we learn from people who have already done some of this building and take, again, what they have done well and amplify that work? In addition to lack of planning, there is lack of structures that allow us to sustain the work, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about the commitments, the structures, how do we create, transatlantic, right, sort of international structures around sustainability? So there's a lot of information here that, I'm hoping once people are able to review, you can see how, one, your area of interest falls within one of those four categories, and what you're considering, right, what you're pondering also fits this approach of being able to say, what are we doing well? How do we do more of it? How do we dream about the future? And how do we sustain it? Maybe your area of interest tackles one of those sort of areas, right? It doesn't have to answer everything, but it says, I want to be able to present on what we're doing well and how we can do more of it, right? So that is a place to start. In terms of, I'm just being mindful of the time, in terms of what the actual proposal must include, right? It's here as well. It's a 500-word abstract, right? We explain this is what an abstract is, right? Give us the title, right? How it fits within the theme, and you have to explain how it fits, right? We often get submissions that generally are very interesting, compelling, but it doesn't respond to the theme and the call of this conference. We wanted to also include learning objectives. What are you hoping to achieve by sharing, right, and disseminating this work, and then inviting people in for feedback? We have 4 types of proposals that can be submitted. One is an interactive workshop, a panel, artist facilitator, or performance. And so within the workshop, the workshop, panel, and artist facilitator, all 90 minutes. So within that 90 minutes, we're asking you to, design it in such a way that is interactive, right? It's inviting people in, right? No one wants to sort of sit through and be lectured, and right, this has been a space of conversation. And so we want you to think about the ways that you will invite people in to what you're offering. The only difference here is that the proposal that you may submit around sort of a performance or artistic expression will be limited to 25 to 30 minutes. So here's, again, just sort of the outline. And we give
And
you—
can I say something really quickly about abstracts? Because it's a summary. 500 words is not a lot. And what you're being asked to do is, it seems like a lot within a very short word limit. So understand that, like, when we say outline some learning objectives, tell us how this responds to the theme. We don't need you to write a paragraph about how it responds to the theme. That you can do that in a sentence.
Yes.
You can outline 3 learning objectives in 1 sentence, right? It would, we're
Right.
going to address, precarity. We're going to address solutions. That's 1 sentence, right? And there's a phrase for each learning objective, right? So you can be, you don't have to be effusive about, in terms of explaining for a very long period of time what you're doing. You can do all of those things very quickly.
Yes. And I think the as concise as you can be also helps us understand what exactly you're trying to convey, right? Sometimes we have a lot of words because we're not sure what we're trying to say. And so if you're able to hit that, we're not going to cut you off at 500, right? We're just saying, we want you to be clear, right, about what you want to offer, so that the people who are receiving it are also clear, right? They're like, this is interesting, but I don't know what we're talking about. Right.
Cam, I'm sorry, do we have some examples of abstracts that we can put on the website, or are they already there?
We can provide.
Okay.
So yes, that would be, I think that would be helpful. So it, and essentially, what we want to hear, well, I'll say it in a different way. We're not looking for like a perfect proposal, right? We're interested in, how do you articulate your idea, right? Your offering. How does it fit within the theme? And how will people learn from you, right? Again, this space has been designed for us to connect with other people who are considering, right, different aspects of their practice or what they're doing in the world, and to be able to get feedback. So I do want to bring in just a few questions that we can answer really quickly. One is, I would like to get feedback about about a specific proposal. Who should I reach out to? Send emails, and I'll put this in the chat, to info@blackmuslimpsychology.org. Info@blackmuslimpsychology.org. We're going to have, after this info session, we're going to have some sort of more informal, what we're calling like office hours. So if you want to pop in and say, I want to get live feedback from someone about an idea that I'm considering, Malika Ali is a member of our planning committee, and she's going to host those office hours. So please feel free to reach out to us at info@blackmuslimpsychology.org. Another question is, would it be possible to propose a community participation workshop offering insight and providing collaborative feedback on ongoing or unfinished research? And that person went on to say, I'm conducting interviews with families from different faith and racial and ethnic backgrounds around navigating mental health with loved ones suffering from severe conditions. I've conducted 10 interviews, but it's difficult to find support groups for Black Muslim families. Yes, this would be
Yes.
a space, right, for you to say, this is the research that I'm conducting so that we can devise, right, approaches that help Black Muslim families that are navigating like the mental health system. That is absolutely a proposal that would be welcomed here.
And I should also add that in general, I mean, I do professional conferences and other spaces, right? Just because of the work that I do. Often I'm fleshing out like things that like I'm presenting something as far as it's come, but also this is a space where I actively sort of put myself in conversation with the audience so that I can actually take it to where it needs to go, because there are pieces of it that I haven't figured out yet. So
Yeah.
so that's the other thing I think it's important to emphasize. You don't have to have all the answers, and you shouldn't have all the answers, right? Because otherwise, why are you in conversation with people, right? This is actually a space of give and take. So please use that as an opportunity to help you take the thing to where you want it to go next,
Yes.
um, if that's where you are.
Right. And it doesn't have to be, again, something up like a polished, here is the solution, right?
Right.
I have some thoughts about this and I want to share it with other people. I want to get
Yeah.
feedback. This will help, right, in further development. That is welcomed, right? Because what you will also get is perspective from people who are from a wide range of perspectives, not just mental health, right?
Right.
And so if you're devising, say, a mental health intervention, an artistic intervention, but there are lawyers and educators and anthropologists and scientists in the room.
And people who might be clients, people who might be on the receiving end of those services who are saying, yeah, honey, no, that no. Or yes.
Right.
Right. Right. So absolutely think of this as a space where you can say, you know what, y'all, I'm stuck here.
Yes.
I've gotten this far and I'm stuck.
Yes. And so I would also encourage, if you want to submit, to think about what you would also like to receive, right? So
Yeah.
that it is a collaboration. I want to
Yes.
receive feedback. I want people to share my work. I want to connect with others who are doing something similar, or we can build, right, coalitions around a particular topic. So yes, what you have to offer is what you're submitting the proposal for. And we want you to also consider how is this going to be meaningful for me as
And
well?
you can also build that receivership or receiving into the design of your session.
Absolutely.
Right. So
Absolutely.
like, so if maybe we do a reflection exercise together, maybe we brainstorm and come up with a list of things. Maybe I take a survey, an informal survey or a poll, whatever. What do they call those little things you do on those little interactive polls or whatever? Like there's a lot of ways that you could actually really build this thing that you want to get back into the design of your session, right? So yeah.
So this gives you an example of like what the rooms look like. The forum is a space that we were in last year. It is literally full of light, right? And so very conducive to conversations for people really being able to ponder. So you'll have this space, you'll have the setup. And here is an example that we also give of how your proposal will be evaluated, right? Is it clear, right? Are you able to convey what it is you're wanting to contribute? Um, don't feel like you have to like zhuzh up your language, for lack of a better term. Like speak plainly, right? This is what I'm proposing. This is what I would like to get feedback on. This is what I'm offering. Um, and so on this scale, right, is how we evaluate, right? And what we're essentially looking for is, how are you responding to the conference theme? Yes. And we want to be able to highlight different ways of approaching, right, challenges, but also opportunities in community, and that we are willing to do that together in dialogue. So we want you to engage other folks. We want you to be clear. We want you to not be shy about why you are knowledgeable in this area, right? Um, and then we'll give you opportunities, right? And again, in that 500 words, you can actually do a lot. So I don't want people to feel intimidated, like, well, I have so much to say. Reach out to us, get some of that live feedback before you submit, but don't, I would encourage you not to withhold because you're not sure. Just please ask us, and we're more than willing to give some live feedback. So here's just some important dates to remember. The deadline is April 28th. We have a quick turnaround so people can understand, like, you know, if I'm accepted, or we have some questions about whether or not it's a fit. Maybe you can tweak your proposal. And then here's a checklist. We do ask for you to submit some kind of resume. Again, don't think of this in the formal sense, but we want to know who you are, right? Who are you in this space? How are you bringing in your expertise into this conversation? Picture and then a brief bio, okay? What might you also add here, Donna? I want to be aware of the time. We have about 5 minutes left.
Okay. You mean just in general or on this particular page?
Just, well, maybe in general, but also responding to some like specific themes that we've seen in either people's reluctance to submit a proposal, or how we've assisted those who aren't sure, but you know, alhamdulillah, they've attended and presented, and it's been just amazing, right, to see.
So yeah, so I mean we've definitely like even just reached out to people just to say, you know, because you know they're just sitting there, you know, doing all this amazing stuff and like and you know and didn't think that, you know, so we've had those conversations with people to sort of help them strategize about, okay, you know what, this what you're doing around X is amazing. We want you to tell us about it. Can you share this with the community? We can do it like this. We're happy to sort of brainstorm with you about like, you know, how to articulate it, but also sort of like, you know, what that might look like. We're not going to do the work for you, of course, but we're happy to sort of be in conversation with you about, you know, about what that might look like, right? Um, and so we've done that. We've had proposals that were submitted were just, you know, not quite, just maybe a little rough around the edges. Um, but we've actually sort of looked at that and said, there's a seed, there's a kernel here. Let's reach out to the, you know, to the submitter and say, hey, you know, listen, can we, whatever, can we sort of smooth out this edge or smooth out that edge? So we're happy to do that as well. We're certainly happy to answer questions before you put something in, you know, brainstorm with you or just or clarify or whatever it is that you need. But also, I think the main thing is just please, 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 like look at everything that you bring,
Yes.
right? And be your own hype person, right? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because you're amazing. Um, you know, you know, you're amazing. Feel free. I think also I want to emphasize, feel free to collaborate because if you from the previous slide, feel free to collaborate with others, right? So if you're feeling sort of overwhelmed at the prospect of doing this by yourself, bring others into a conversation, submit a panel to say, hey, so you know, you guys can sort of figure out together what a good, not only what a good submission would look like, but a good framing, a good set of questions to ask or whatever. But also, you know, you can sort of like, you could just sort the session design and all these other things that you need to figure out. And, you know, before the, you know, before and at the conference, you can do this in company with people. Collaborative work is always welcome. And it's, you know, there's a lot of good that can come out of, you know, you, and there may be people, you know, well, people whose work you've admired from afar, like whatever, right? You know, and it's also a way to bring more people into the conversation, right? So we definitely encourage collaborative proposals. So like, feel free to sort of think that way. And I'm also, I think the last thing I want to emphasize here is also just, I just want to say again, all you engineers, all of you, all of you, like, all of you, like silent types, all of you, like, um, you know, all of you folks who have never done anything formally, all of you people who hate the ivory tower, like, that's totally okay. Like, we want everybody.
Yeah.
I hate the ivory tower too. So, like, let's just, it's like, you know what I'm saying? I have a love-hate relationship with it. right?
Yeah.
But like, you know, it's there's room for everybody here potentially. We want to um, find a way to bring you in. And if there is a path for that, we will do our best to make that happen. Um, we're not sort of starting from a perspective of, oh, you know, you got to be like, you know, you got to have the secret handshake and you got to have the money and you got to have the like whatever. Like I'm not, this is not picking on any particular type of folks, but just like we're not starting from a perspective of exclusion, but one of inclusion. So we want everybody who can and wants to be a part of this project to be in it, and we will do what we can to help that come to reality. Um, and so just, you know, just talk to us about what you're thinking. If you're still nervous or whatever, or you still have questions, we're happy to do what we can to make that, you know, but to bring you into the conversation in a way that makes sense for you. Um,
There's a question just really quickly. Bashira Max, she's asking if one person submit the proposal and credentials, if it's a joint idea or a panel. And there's a section there in the submission form that says, you know, anything else you would like to add. So you might be the person submitting, right? You're the point person, but any additional information that you can add about who your panelists are,
hmm,
that's what we're looking for. And
yeah.
so, yes, you can submit more than one resume, headshot, bio. There's space enough for you to provide that information. So let us know who's also going to be in the room with you. Um,
And I think and I think, I mean, it's also very important because it gives us a more robust picture of the whole, you know, thing, right? Who are these people? What do they bring to the conversation? Whatever, right? Is helpful to know when evaluating.
yes. So we're in following up, we're going to make available that sample, like a sample abstract, or maybe two, right? That gives you a sense of what a panel or an interactive workshop will look like. We're going to share more in the upcoming, maybe in the next week or two, once we're over sort of Eid, office hours with Malika Ali, who will give live feedback around questions that people have and proposals. Info at blackmuslimpsychology.org. Please there's no small question, ask us. It's probably likely other people have similar questions. So any questions that we receive, we will do our best to also just share out publicly in our response, and definitely encourage collaborative proposals. If you're getting a sense of kind of what your plans might be, the venue for the conference is in Chicago. It's Hyde Park, South Side, on the campus of the University of Chicago. We have hotel accommodations that are literally right next door to the venue. And this was an amazing place for us to be in last year, and we are anticipating the same for this year. We are the only gathering in the building. So the reason that we do that intentionally is so that every space available to us becomes one where we can think and process and kind of come together and think through some of, you know, again, the topics that are being raised. This proposal guide also includes some information about Muslim Wellness Foundation. Black Muslim Psychology Conference falls within the Omar Ibn Said Institute for Black Muslim Studies and Research within MWF. So you can read more, again, about what that is, these areas that we focus on, and why. So I'm going to, this recording will be available for folks. Please, info at blackmuslimpsychology.org. Send us those questions. And also nominate people that you know who have something really worthwhile to share and they would never submit. They're like, I'm not a presenter. And you're like, no, here, there are so many people who tell us I'm not a presenter. And then they end up loving sort of being just the opportunity to share about their work with other really excited and interested and invested folks. So maybe you don't call yourself that. You're like, I'm not a scholar, I'm not an academic, I'm not a researcher, you're a person with interest and commitment to Black Muslims and Black Muslim life. We want you here, inshallah. So with that, last words, Dr. Donna Auston.
I hope to see you all there.
Inshallah.
You know, it's if you haven't been already, there's really no space like it. Um, it's a really blessed, it's just a really blessed gathering. And we hope that you all can be a part of it. We hope that you can support it. We hope that you will tell your friends, whether they want to present or whether they just want to come and kick it, right? We welcome that as well. We would like for all of you to please just spread the word, and encourage people to come. Encourage people to support, donate if you can, sponsor somebody if you have a couple extra dollars. Um, you know, because this is a grassroots organization, um, that relies on the support of everybody in the community, to make it possible, to make it continue. I cannot tell you, I cannot emphasize enough, how much thought and care goes into providing a particular type of experience, not just in terms of content, but also in terms of, you know, the meals, the space, the aesthetics, so that you come here and, you know, you're not looking at holes in the wall. You're sitting in a comfortable seat. The food is good. You know, whatever. So that while you're here, you feel cared for, you feel like somebody thought of you. Um, and that takes resources.
Right.
You know, there's really no way around it. We unfortunately do not have access to a staff of elves to make things just magically appear. It would be nice if we did, but we don't. So like any support that you can give in whatever form, again, all of those things, like if you can give some money, if you can spread the word, if you can do all of these things helps, and all of these things are valuable. So we appreciate any type of boosting, lifting, you know, whatever that you can do to support this effort. Because it's by you, and meaning all of us, right? And for us, right? So, inshallah. Thank you.
Inshallah. All right. So if you remember anything else, info@blackmuslimpsychology.org. Ask us questions, reach out, let us know what you're thinking, nominate other people to also be a part of the space. And finally, read the proposal guide. Right. This is, and Donna and I know this as, you know, professors. We take so much time to put together a syllabus, and sometimes people don't read it. That's okay. But we're going to point you back to it so you at least have, you know, access to that information, you know, as you're considering what you would like to contribute. So thank you all for joining us today. We're going to follow up with some examples, with some office hours, and with some additional responses to questions that people have. And we hope to see you in Chicago in July, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.